this article, it was published in the Reader Digest in 1997, and you look at the title of the article is How Honest Are Dentists? Okay? The author of the article traveled all across the US, and he had his mouth examined by 50 different dentists, and he brought with him full mouth radiograph, OPG, bite-wing, everything. Okay? And he asked dentists for two things. First, treatment plan. Second, treatment fee. What do you think happened here? What do you think? Sorry? Yes, massive variation. The treatment plan varied from no treatment up to full mouth rehab. Okay? And the treatment fee ranging from $18 to $30,000. If you take into account the inflation rate today, that's almost 50 grand. Okay? Now, I think there's a lot of explanation why this is the case. Okay? I think one of the reasons why we have this wide variation is this. The way we practice dentistry or medicine, we use a lot of clinical practice, we use a lot of clinical experience, and you know, different clinicians have a different experience because they get exposed to a different group of patients. And that's why we have wide variety of treatment approach, wide variety of management. And that can be a problem. Okay? And I think evidence-based came up with the idea that instead of relying on your clinical experience to drive your treatment plan, perhaps it might be a better idea to use something else. If you look at how do we seek truth in the clinical practice, there probably may be four main ways of seeking truth to form the basis for your treatment plan or for your clinical decision. First, maybe it's what we call anecdote. Basically, you heard someone say something and then you believe that. Something like, I've been doing this for 20 years, I know it works, so we just follow whatever you hear. Second, maybe you think that someone is expert in that particular field and you believe what they said and you just use that as a basis for your clinical decision. Or you can use your own clinical experience as well as you see your patient, you treat your patient. If you think that works, so you keep doing it, and that's the basis of your clinical decision. Or you can use literature. When I give a talk on this topic with the undergrads, I usually put this slide up and I will ask the students, do you think this is a good quality root canal filling? You will get resounding yes. Okay? And I will ask them next question. If I were to tell you that this is a technique that you should use for your canal preparation, this is the medication that you should be using, this is the operation technique that you should be using, would you believe what I say? And again, resounding yes. I usually follow this up by this picture, and I would say, if I were to tell you that my name is actually Clark Kent, and I can fly, would you believe me? It would usually say no. And I will ask them again, why? Why do you believe me in the first slide and the second slide you don't? What's the reason? What's the difference? And one of them, probably just one of the smart-ass students, they will usually ask, can you fly? Can you show me that you can fly? The next question I will ask them again is that, why do you require proof for the second slide, but you don't require proof for the first one? You see the difference? And this is the issue. The literature goes through vigorous scientific scrutiny, but expert opinion don't. Okay? So that's probably the one reason why we should be relying on literature rather than the expert opinion. There's an article by Elderton in 1990. He found that dentists tend to prescribe amalgam refilling if they know that that filling was done by someone else other than themselves. So essentially it means that their amalgam filling is actually better than other people. And this kind of thing actually happens in other disciplines as well. In endodontics, there's a series of articles by Goldman in the 70s. Repeatedly finding is that if you let endodontists read their own thing, the apical lesions tend to heal more promptly. Every single one of them, every single one of us are subjected to what we call operative bias. Our works are always better than others, okay? And we can't shake off this bias. It's inherently in us. It's innate. Basically, it happens when we're born. And this is one of the reasons why you can't rely on your clinical observation, because you can't shake off this operative bias. But if you were to conduct a well-controlled, well-designed study, you can get rid of operative bias very easily by separating these two. Basically, you have operator and evaluator are different people, so you separate these two processes and you get rid of operative bias completely. So that's why, instead of relying on your own clinical experience, clinical observation, maybe you rely on literature might actually be better. We don't have a lot of endo resident here, so this one might not be that exciting to you. But anyway, this is the graph of the prognosis study in endodontics. Basically, the research question is we're trying to find out how effective endodontic treatment is, okay? And over the spanning of 3 decades, this research question is popping up all the time, and people keep trying to answer these questions. So there's a lot of information here. But the point I want to make here is that over 30 years, the treatment effectiveness of endodontics varied from less than 50% up to 100%. So what exactly is it? How high is our treatment effectiveness? Sometimes we have more than one paper and we can't tell how effective the treatment is. And I think this is one of the beauty of evidence-based concept or systematic review, because we don't rely on just one paper. We look at the whole body of evidence. We look at the whole literature. The keyword here in evidence-based is totality. We don't pick and choose. We look at all of them. And then we look at the study design of all the studies and we rank them up. Basically, if there's a different design, we rank them up by the hierarchy of evidence. And we look at the highest level there is, and if there's the same design, there's more than one paper there, you can actually combine them using a statistical tool called meta-analysis. So essentially, systematic review and meta-analysis is our tool to analyze and summarize the current state of knowledge and basically give us some basis whether we should go right or we should go to left because of what. And sometimes we don't have an answer, as in we don't have enough information. We have some kind of an information what to do next. Now, let's just say that we kind of get the concept of what, why, and how we need to do evidence-based. We need to do a systematic review. The next step is you should know something about search engine or how to search the literature. The most common search engine, you probably use Google, right? And the Google have a subsection of Google. It's called Google Scholar. Essentially, it's software. It's what we call web crawler. The Google sends this software and web crawler going to the web page. All the internet page in the world. Then they collect most peer-reviewed online academic journals, book, conference, paper, thesis, and whatnot. And then they send all this information to Google headquarters, and basically there's an algorithm that goes through all this information and they make a calculated guess at what is a scholarly source, what's not. And then they put the ranking and they put high weight on citation counts. If this paper or this page got a lot of citation, the rank go up. Okay? The ranks go up. There's an article that trying to look at the strengths and weaknesses of Google Scholar in comparison to sort of mainstream biomedical science citation databases like PubMed, Scopus, Web of Science, that sort of thing. We found that Google Scholar has a lot of issues. First issue is that because it's a for-profit sort of organization, they have a lot of secrets. We don't know at all how wide their net is. We don't know their databases. We don't know how many journals they actually cover. We don't know how often these databases are updated. And We don't know the criteria, we don't know the parameter they use to determine the scholarly sources. And because of that, it's very, very difficult or actually impossible to conduct a comprehensive search based solely on Google Scholar. Perhaps it's good for dirty and quick search, but if you want to do a comprehensive search, Google Scholar is not a good source of information here. It's also vulnerable to manipulation as well. If you know about search engine optimization, basically it's a tricky way to bring up your web page to the first rank or first page. The same concept can be applied here. Basically, first trick is what we call a link farm. If you want to increase your ranking of your article, you can actually buy a server and create a fake link that link to your paper, link to your article, and your paper will go up on the ranking. And also, in some university, they allow the staff to change the website profile, web page. And you can actually manipulate your paper, make a lot of links on your page, and you can actually increase the ranking of your paper. So it's vulnerable to all this manipulation. PubMed, everyone uses it, so I'm not going to talk much about it. It's free, it's the largest database on earth. Second, Cochrane Library. This is a good source, or basically the good starting point for whatever clinical question you have in mind, or whatever research question you have in mind. Start with this, okay? Because it's a sort of a controlled systematic review, good systematic review. The protocol there is top-notch, so good source. If you can't find anything here, then you can start thinking about doing your own systematic review and meta-analysis. Web of Science, Web of Knowledge, or Science Citation Index. It's a good database for doing a secondary search. This is what we call a secondary search. The concept is this. Let's just say that you have one article that directly answers your question, whatever that may be. Okay? You have one article in front of you, and you want to know whether there is or there are any article that also answer your question that got published after this article. The concept is that if there are any article that published after your article at hand in front of you published, chances are those articles is going to cite the article that you have in your hand. Okay? So you can put all that title and everything detailed in the database, and it's going to go something like this. Okay? If your article that answers your question is this article, you have a retained instrument and whatnot, and you can click this term cited, so it means that since 2010, there have been 3 articles that cite this article. Okay? So if you click on number 3 here, there will be the next page show up and list all the articles that cite this impact of retained treatment. This is what we call a forward search. So you search forward in time. There's another technique called backward search. Basically the same principle but applied in the back in time. So basically you look up the reference list. So if the article that you have in front of you conducted by a good researcher, chances are high that they are going to cite the article that got published previously. Now, I think to me, there are 2 kinds of truth. First, it's a static truth. It's a real truth. It doesn't change no matter what. I think the analogy that I like to use is a jigsaw puzzle. It's like a jigsaw puzzle that is completely assembled. Whatever that picture may be, it doesn't change, okay? But the problem with the real truth or the static truth is that you can't get to it. For example, if you want to know whether treatment A or treatment B is actually better for your patient, if you want to get to the real truth, you have to divide world population in half. 3 billion get treatment A, another 3 billion get treatment B, and then you follow this patient for a period of time. And as you can see, financially it's just impossible. Ethically it's not possible as well, and perhaps logistically it's prohibitive. So you just can't do it. So the way that you can do it is actually you have to take sample. Okay? Take sample, conduct the same study, half get treatment A, another half get treatment B, and then you get the conclusion. Once you get the conclusion, it's like you have a small piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Now, if there's more study to be done on these questions, you will have another piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And the size of the jigsaw puzzle, it depends on the sample size. If the next study have a large sample size, you have a big piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And the act of you putting these pieces together, and then you look at this picture and you're trying to make an educated guess of what the big picture look like, that's the meta-analysis. And this kind of truth is dynamic, okay? It can change over time. And to illustrate my point, I would like to introduce you to Professor Anides. He's a professor at the Stanford School of Medicine, and to me, he's like a mother of all meta-analysts because his research expertise is on doing a meta-analysis on meta-analysis paper. Or if you want to call him, it's like he's a big data scientist. He's dealing with a lot of data points, like millions and millions of data points. He published a very, very influential paper titled "Why Most Published Research Findings Are False." Have a read here, very, very interesting article. He published this article in 2005 in the Journal of American Medical Association. The way he did this paper is that he looked through highly prestigious journal, basically a journal with high impact factor, more than 7, such as the New England Journal of Medicine, Journal of American Medical Association, or Lancet. Just to give you a point of reference, the highest impact factor journal in dentistry is Journal of Dental Research, and the impact factor is 3.8. Okay? So impact factor is a lot higher. And he looked through the article that published between 1990 to 2003, and he picked the study that got cited more than 1,000 times. Again, just to give you a point of reference, if my article got cited more than 100, I think I'm over the moon. Okay? So essentially, he looked at landmark studies published in highly prestigious journal, and then he compared it with against the subsequent studies, we compared it with a large sample size with the similar or better control, basically with the higher level of evidence. And this is what he found. Approximately 1/3 of the highly cited clinical studies are later found to be incorrect. 1/3, that's massive, okay? So that's why I say that the truth that we can get to can change over time. Now, let's just say that you have all the articles that are trying to answer your questions, and at the highest level of evidence, you happen to have more than one paper. The next question you have to ask yourself is that, should you try to combine them, or should you try to do a meta-analysis? I think the answer or the question you probably, if you were to do it, are you combining apples with oranges? Basically, you have to make a judgment call whether the study that you have at hand are too different or they are similar enough. Because if they are too different, it doesn't make sense to do meta-analysis. If they're similar enough, go ahead, do it. Now, basically, the technical term of this issue is what we call heterogeneity. There are 3 types of heterogeneity. The first one is clinical heterogeneity. We're talking about differences in clinical protocol, treatment plan, treatment protocol, or subjects. I give you an example of in endodontic field then. We know and we have a solid evidence to demonstrate that teeth with apical radiolucency have a lower prognosis than teeth without apical radiolucency. The difference is about 15%. So if this, let's say that you have 2 articles, one article conducted on teeth with radiolucency and the other article conducted on teeth without radiolucency. These 2 papers shouldn't be meta-analyzed because they are too different. Basically, you have to look at all prognostic factors of the studies or of the treatments, and then you have to make a judgment call whether it's similar enough or it's too different. Methodological heterogeneity refers to differences in study design. So basically, you shouldn't be combining case control study with randomized control trial because different studies have a different risks of bias and have a different ability to infer causality between factor of interest and even of interest. So if they are at different level of hierarchy of the evidence, you shouldn't be combining them. Statistical heterogeneity refers to differences in treatment in the outcome or in the results of the studies. For example, one study telling you that treatment A is more effective, the other study telling you that treatment B is more effective. This is what we call statistical heterogeneity. There's a test to it. There's a test you can do, and you basically got driven by those tests. Okay. Yeah. All right. Now, meta-analysis essentially is just a software. Okay. So if you want to do it, you just put in numbers. You hit the button, you're going to get another number. But whether or not it means anything, it depends on what you think about the data. You have to be able to answer yourself whether you are combining apples with oranges. Okay? If you insist on doing it, you might get something like that, which means nothing. Now, once you finish the meta-analysis, you're going to get something like this. It's what we call a forest plot. This is what I did back in 2012. It's a comparison between pharmacopoeia and MTA in pulpotomy. And let's just look at the first study. 2001, Crucia healing rates is basically 28 teeth healed, 30, that's a total number. In the pharmacopoeia group, that's 23. And this is the result of that article. Okay, so the square dot, the square there, that's the what we call a rate difference. Essentially, it's about 17% in favor, the healing rate is 17% in favor of MTA. Okay? And the line here, the horizontal line, that's a 95% confidence interval. The bigger the square, the larger or the heavier, the larger the weight. And the weight is basically depends on the sample size. You have a larger sample size, you have a low variance, you have a higher weight. And once you combine them all together, you're going to get that kind of a black diamond there. That's the sort of a combined results. Okay? So in this meta-analysis, MTA is significantly superior to pharmacopoeia in pulpotomy. But the question is by how much? So you got to look at the effect size. So the effect size is 10%. So that if you draw the vertical line down, that's about 10%. So if pharmacopoeia had 80% chance of radiographic success, MTA is going to get about 90% chance of radiographic success. More precise, because the 95% confidence interval is getting narrower, you have a more confident with your evidence. Now, this is the way that you report your result. It's a good reporting practice. Okay, you have to start with effect size of outcome measure and then exact p-value. You don't report in this form, p less than or p more than. That's in the past. Okay, when you don't have a computational power, you can report in this way. But at the moment, it's our fashion now, you don't, okay? And also you have to report 95% confidence interval. So the perfect result reporting is something like this. Effect measure or effect size, rate difference 10%, p-value 0.06, 95% confidence interval minus 1.2 to 14. That's a proper result reporting. Now, I would like to talk about p-value here because I think we overemphasize the significance of p-value. Let's just say that you have one article that looked into a pocket depth reduction and it compared the endogain with the standard treatment protocol, and p-value is 0.0003. Should we use endogain here? P-value very, very low. I think the information here is not enough because p-value only only tell me that there's a difference between two groups, but as a clinician, you want to know how much better would I be rather than if I would get better. Okay? P-value just tell you that you would get better with M to gain, but you don't know how much. Let's say that the pocket reduction differences between M to gain and standard treatment is 0.15 per millimeter. Would you choose M to gain in your treatment protocol? Probably not, because the effect size is so small and it's within the marginal error when you measure the pocket. So that's the answer, and that's the reason why we perhaps will have to de-emphasize the significance of p-value and perhaps put more focus on effect size or 95% confidence interval. I will tell you more later on. Now that's 95% confidence interval. What it is that if you were to conduct the same experiment or same trial millions times, 95% of those millions trial, the mean difference will fall into these two intervals, two limits. Okay? So it tells us about the precision of the studies. I would like to contrast precision with accuracy. That's the difference between accuracy and precision. Top left, that's low accuracy and low precision. Accuracy, we're talking about the chance of hitting the bullseye. Okay? And accuracy, you can get accuracy by using the experimental design with the higher level evidence, like randomized control trial, you get a high accuracy. The precision in this case coming from the sample size. If you have a larger sample size, you have a higher precision. Now, get into a little bit of p-value, and now I'll basically introduce you to another interesting law in statistics, I.F. Fisher. So he's the person who popularized the use of p-value and pretty much laid the groundwork of the null hypothesis testing. Basically, I took the whole chunk of this paragraph of his book, the seminal book, wrote in 1925, and he said that he prefers to set a low standard of significance at the 5% point. Scientific fact should be regarded as experimentally established only if probability sign experiment rarely fail to give this level of evidence. The whole point of this paragraph is that I want you to see the word preferred. Okay, so 5% of P 0.05, it's essentially it just fall off the sky. Basically, this person plucked 5% number out of thin air. There's no scientific basis whatsoever. Okay, it prefers to set that's it. Now, this is his intention. If p-value less than 0.05, repeat the experiment. That's what he wants us to do. If subsequent study also give the significant level, observed effect will allow it to be the resolved chance alone. So significant is merely that. It's worthy of attention in the form of doing more experiment, but not approved in itself. Not approved in itself, okay? So p-value is measured how severely the null hypothesis was contradicted by the data. And it's not part of formal inferential methods. But in our mind as a clinician, we look at p-value and we see less than 0.05, that's a proof of difference. But in his mind, the person who started the whole movement, that's not the case, okay? P-value is part of a fluid, non-quantifiable process of drawing conclusion from observation. The thing is, even Fisher himself could offer very little guidance on how the size of p-value should affect a conclusion, and neither has anyone else. Now, I would like to summarize the problem of the misuse of p-value here. Why use a single cutoff point when the choice of such point is completely arbitrary, out of thin air, no scientific basis whatsoever? Why we stuck with 0.05? And also why we make the question whether treatment is effective dichotomy. In real life, nothing is black and white, okay? Most of the time, you're dealing with a different shade of gray. That's real life. And another question, what's the difference between p-value of 0.04 and 0.06? Think about it. In fact, perhaps it's more of a continuum rather than the binary choices. Now, if you look at the weather forecast and you read something like there's a 30% chance of rain tomorrow, that's a probabilistic information. Okay? To translate that probabilistic information to deterministic information or actionable intelligence, or in this case, whether or not I should bring an umbrella with me tomorrow is far from straightforward. We should know that all the information that we get from the statistical test, all of them are probabilistic information, and you have to see it as such. So in statistics, in probabilistic information, you're not going to get yes or no. You're not going to get 0 or 100%. You're not going to get never or always. You're going to get something in between. Okay? And because it's a range, instead of looking at p-value as the ultimate answer, looking at effect size as an ultimate answer, it actually might be more beneficial to look at 95% confidence interval as a result, because it incorporates two things. First, effect size. Second, in precision of your studies. So you have a wide range which more similar or more true to the situation. So what to do when you found all these shortcomings, you found these flaws in the concept of p-value? Bigger are better, okay? Always bigger are better. I'm talking about larger effect size here, okay? The larger the effect size, the higher the likelihood that you're going to get true difference. If you have just a small effect size, it might be just a chance. Basically, you just happen to see it. It's not a true difference. If you have two papers, one basically gives two opposite results. One was done with the established, validated techniques and design, and the other paper was done with the newly developed techniques and design. You should go with the established one. The reason is that when you actually conduct experiments, there are always some nuance or always some subtle differences that you need to basically hone your skill. The experimenter, the researcher needs time to actually perfect that skill to conduct the experiment. So chances are, if it's a validated, established techniques or design, it's not likely that the experimenter or researcher is going to mess up. So that's the reason why you should go with the established protocol. Again, multiple sources and type of evidence are desirable. It's like you're reading a newspaper. You can't just read a newspaper with the left-leaning kind of outlet. You also have to read paper with the right-leaning, and maybe you can add a sort of tabloid into your news reading as well. Because you have a different source of information, you're going to get more balanced view of the world, and that's what you want. Again, it's very, very rare that a single experiment can establish proof. Replications are the key here, okay? Repeating the experiments are the key, and the way to find replication study is to use science citation index, as I told you before. If you have one study that answers your questions, look in the past, look in the future, okay? Trying to find replication and trying to combine them together and have a sort of a balanced view of the world. The truth of knowledge claim, you may have the evidence at hand, but it would be better if you have a biological explanation, or in this case, biological possibility to back that up as well. Give you an example. EDTA has been used in endo for long time. We have a strong biological evidence supporting its use. For example, we have a scanning electron microscope evidence to show that EDTA can basically get rid of the debris, open up all the internal tubule, allow the sodium chloride to get into the nooks and crannies of the root canal. So that's a strong biological basis. Let's just say that you have a strong clinical evidence as well, but the evidence that you have was wrong. Now, the way you consider this situation is that you have to think of it in both directions, benefits and harm. Okay? You have to think that what if you use EDTA, what could be the harm? And the harm of using EDTA is perhaps just wasting your time, wasting a little bit of money. It's not going to have a catastrophic failure because of EDTA. So that's probably why we still keep using it. But the reason why we have to consider whether or if the evidence you have was wrong is this. This is an article published in The Economist in 2013. Essentially, he looked at how we conduct our experiment. Let's just say that we have 1,000 hypotheses, okay? And you have a 10% accuracy rate. So essentially, you have true hypotheses, 100 true hypotheses and 900 false hypotheses. If you were to conduct the experiment, you were to conduct the study, you set the power of the study at basically at the standard 80% power, which means that we are willing to accept 20% false negative. So that's what we've got. 20 out of 100, that's the red bit, that's a false negative. Okay? And you set the significant level at 5%, so it means that you're willing to accept false positive at 5% out of 900, so 5% out of 900 is 45. Now if you combine false positive with true positive, the accuracy rate of positive study is only 64%. So the best case scenario, you set the significant level at 5%, power is set at 80%, the positive study will be wrong in 36% of the time. So in reality, the situation is actually worse because most of the studies that published in our journal are underpowered, small sample size, and if it's underpowered, the number here, it's going to be higher. Negative study also don't get published because of the publication bias. Editor, reviewer might say that you didn't find anything, why bother publishing it? But the problem with that is you have, or we, when we look at all the information, we have overly inflated sense of security, overly inflated sense of confidence of the positive studies, which might be wrong. Okay? And replication study don't get published because they might say, there's nothing new here, don't bother. Again, if you don't have a replication, you don't have the chance to confirm or deny the previously published studies that may be wrong. So, because we all academics here, I urge you all, as an editor or a referee, don't reject negative study. Allow replication papers to be published, and if you are a grant accessor, give some money to the guys who are going to do a replication study. The reason is that if you look at individual study, that might hold true, nothing new, not interesting, but if you look at the study as a random data point, in fact, the negative studies and the replication studies actually contribute more to the body of knowledge than positive study even. And actually there have been a movement to change our publication or publishing format to what we call register report. So instead of finish everything, send for peer review, and make a decision then and there whether you get published, they propose that we should separate the peer review into two steps. First, at the study design. Okay? So you pay more attention to study design, all the methodological of the studies. If you have provisional acceptance, you go collect data, analyze data, write report, and you go into the stage 2 peer review. And provided that you have a provisional acceptance, your result or your finding will basically get published more or less guaranteed. This way, you solve the problem of low statistical power, solve a problem of selective reporting and publication bias. And Professor Chamber from Cardiff University, he wrote this paragraph and summarized the situation quite succinctly. Because the study is accepted in advance, the incentive for authors to change from The incentive for author change from producing the most beautiful story to the most accurate one. Unfortunately, there's no dental journal that sort of adopt this kind of concept. Again, I urge you all to consider this concept. Now, just to conclude, prepare to be wrong, be open-minded, and don't be dogmatic, okay? Even in the best case scenario, 36% of the positive study will be wrong anyway, and in reality, this number should be higher. So what's the big fuss? And please be aware of fallibility of observed world, and please again stay skeptical of whatever information you have at hand. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Professor Sator. And now, we open the floor for questions, and please approach the microphones in the aisle for any questions. If there are none, I will be the one who will be asking question. Okay. So, Professor, let's say someone would like to do a meta-analysis research. So basically, we want to check, we should check evidence-based literature, right? So do you have any suggestions or tips on how to filter these articles or papers to verify if these articles are not from phishing publications or journals?
Not from
Phishing publications, or those are fake publications?
Oh. Fake publication, are you talking about gray literature or are you talking about open access? What do you mean?
Well, basically it's the open access. Sure.
I think in the evidence-based concept, we don't actually reject the article based on the source of publication. We basically look at the merit of the article. Basically, you have to go through a technical aspect, material methods. If everything is okay, then you should consider it. Yeah.
Thank you. So are there any more questions? Thank you.